Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Put your hands together for Guy Delisle and David Ulin.
Hi there. Yeah, all good. Hi.
Hi. So, that's a little loud, right? I should back it up. We're gonna talk for about half an hour or so, and then we'll open it up to questions from you. I've got some small notes, like the president. I like to wing it, hopefully with less disastrous results. And the first thing, actually, so we're going to talk about Hostage, which is the new book, which is Guy's new book, but we're also going to go back and talk about some of the other work in the kind of general arc of the career. The first question I want to ask, as a journalist myself, is let's talk a little. Can we talk a little bit about this notion of graphic journalism? I've talked to Joe Sacco a little bit about this too, and the idea that big conversation in the United States at the moment has to do with subjectivity in journalism. In all journalism, I think, is subjective to some extent, but in graphic journalism, we really are dependent on a kind of subjective vision of the journalist, because you are not only selecting the material you're working with, but you're actually kind of interpreting it visually as well as repertorially. So I wonder if we can just start by talking kind of generally about those challenges and your thoughts on the question of comics as a journalistic medium.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Joe Sacco. He is a journalist, and his comic books talks about journalism. I don't feel like I'm a journalist at all. I go in some place with my wife, I take notes, and if I have anything to talk about, then I do a book. But I can spend a year in some place and come back, read my notes, and there's not enough material, so there's no book. So I don't think a journalist could work like that. And I talk about my kids, I talk about my car, the problem I have with that, and so I mix everything, like everyday life. So I do a bit of explanation, because comic book is very good at explaining stuff and doing funny things too. It's very good for that. So I try to mix all of that, and I don't have the feeling that I'm a journalist. I more have the feeling that I'm writing a long postcard to my family to explain them what I've been through during the year where I was in Jerusalem or Burma. So yeah, I feel that I'm quite far away from being a journalist.
Well, I think that's, yeah, I mean, let's talk about that, though, in relation to Hostage. Hostage is more of a kind of, it's a departure in the sense that it is really someone else's story, right? It's Christophe Andre's story. You are you're the gatherer. The book begins with an image of the two of you sitting at a table and you testing the tape recorder and saying, okay, it's on, start, and then we move into his story, and you are you're only a character in that very opening moment. How is that different? I mean, how is that different? It's obviously different for us as readers, but how is that process different for you as an artist and a writer?
Well, it was so different that it took me so long to say, well, okay, now I do the book, otherwise I have to forget about that, because I've been thinking about it for like 15 years, something like that. And so I record Christophe, so we did some kind of maybe journalistic work in the way that I just transpose his story into a comic book. But then again, I don't really feel like a journalist, because all I do is record him, put that all into pieces in chronological order. And since I like to work with small details, I put all the details that Christophe told me in a way that it's really immersive. So like you're in the head of Christophe and you go through his experience just like he did. That was the whole point of the book. Because when I hear about someone who's kidnapped, I always think, what would I do? Would I try to escape? Would I fight with the people? Would I do that? Well, it's really hard to know. for lots of reasons. But going and having Christophe telling me that story in all sorts of details, I thought, wow, we have to make a book with that. So I just transposed his story.
I love that. I love this idea of working with small details. It's one of the things I admire most about your work. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that as a kind of, just as an idea or a strategy. First of all, what you mean specifically by it in terms of the physical details of the room, but also the intimate details of the day-to-day life, I think, right? And also how that helps to kind of build a character or a scene.
Well, that's what I do when I'm in Jerusalem, for example. I go on the street and I see these garbage that are they're fuming, and then I can talk like for pages just on these garbage and the cats that go around that look like the 1950 cats from the cartoons that we watched when we were young. So yeah, I like to. I've been invited once to ethnologist program to talk about my books because they thought that my books were like some work of ethnologists. I thought, yeah, this is for me. I feel closer to like some part that the ethnologists do, not the analysts after, because I leave that to the reader. But the first part where you gather these small details. I like to observe because that comes from the drawing where you sit at some place and then you look at all the angles, you do your drawing and you just focus on something. It's that way of looking, but with words and text because you do comic books. And I worked the same way with Christophe Andre because he told me all these small details, and I knew right away when I was with him in the restaurant because I met him 15 years ago. I read his story first on the newspaper, and then I had a friend who worked at the same NGO, and she said, "Well, Christophe is going to come and eat with us." And I thought, he's probably not going to want to talk about that story because it's probably like traumatic. Usually,
and that was fairly close. 15 years ago was fairly close. It was only a few years after it happened. He was kidnapped in 1997.
In Chechnya, 3 months after his first mission in NGOs. So just no luck at all. And he came back, and I saw him in 2001. And then I did the recording in 2003. And then it took a long time to actually finish to really put the process. And then I was traveling a lot, so I was thinking, well, I'll do it next year and the next year. And then I realized that 15 years have passed now. It's time to do it somehow.
So, did you know when you first met him? You had read about him, and then he was coming. You were having lunch. Did you know at that point? Did you know initially that this was something that you might want to make a book about, or was it through the process of first getting to speak with him that you developed the idea?
I read his story, and I thought, wow, this is such a great story that actually I mentioned his story in one of my first book, Shenzhen, the little things that I've done on China. And so someone said, you talk about him in your book, and he's going to come and eat with us. And at the time, there was people coming back from, I remember in France, from kidnapping. And they would explain on the radio that it's very hard to come back for lots of reasons. And even one of them, Brice Flotiot, a guy from Toulouse that committed suicide, when he came back, his wife was gone with the guy from Paris Match. Mm-hmm. And he just. So I thought maybe Christophe doesn't want to talk about that. And during that I didn't think. I just when he tell us all that story from beginning to end with all the little chapters, all the little details. I remember with my friend, we were just there looking at him, going like, "Wow, this is great." And I thought, well, we should put that into pictures because right away I know that this is a story with just a lot of small details, and for me it's perfect. I like to work with that, and then from these small details you get a long story. And I wanted to work on time, so that's why there's so many pages.
Right. Now, when you, as you did can we talk about the process of making the book? I'm really interested in that idea, both the initial material, the recordings, but at what point did you start drawing right away? Did you when you're kind of taking notes? I shouldn't assume. I'm wondering, do you take visual notes in the form of sketches as well as written notes, or how does a work like this begin to take shape?
That's a problem. I remember Joe Sacco was saying that because knowing that you have to draw the whole thing, I would ask so many questions to Christophe. I was asking, so what do these guys look like? Are they old? What they're dressed like? What are they wearing? And then all these questions. I remember I asked him, okay, the bowl of soup. What does the bowl of soup look like? And he said, I don't remember what it looked like. So it was just in one room. That was easy. And then I didn't need a lot of reference, but still I had to ask him all these questions. Were there just white walls? And they were all white. And so you have to ask like millions of questions, and I record him for a day, like a long day. We went into cafes, and then from that recording, and one document that the NGO did right after to keep a trace on all that. So I had these two, but it was mainly just on him talking that I've put in two little pieces to put the whole thing in order, because I didn't want to do flashbacks. I didn't want to do meanwhile in France they all go crazy because they don't know where. I wanted just to start from point A and then to go do the whole story, so the reader just stay in the room, stay with him, and just go through exactly what he has lived. Yeah.
I mean, that to me, one of the most powerful things about the book is that it remains constantly focused on him, and only in the rooms in which he is. So when he hears a noise outside, there are all those moments where he hears bang, he doesn't know what it is. It could be gunfire, it could be this, and we don't know either.
That's right.
And there's also those moments where he's keeping track of how long he's been in captivity.
Yeah.
And he's thinking, okay, it's Monday, something's going to happen today, and he's wondering whether anyone knows about him, or he's trying to piece it together. I think it's so effective that we don't know anything that's happening outside of the room.
That's right. We just go through his mind and feel the same thing. And he was saying to me, he thought he would be there just for a weekend, and then maybe 3 days, and then he would go back and finish his work on Wednesday, something like that. And then 3 days go by, a week goes by, and then 2 weeks goes by, and then he told me you start to think into months, and then you go crazy, because in your mind you're not ready for months. You can only say, well, it's going to be 2 weeks maximum. I cannot stay longer than 2 weeks. So I wanted to show that process mentally, how you don't go crazy basically on just doing nothing. Because for one day you just attach where you have no pencil, nothing to read, I would go crazy over a week, and then weeks goes on, and then so in your head, how do you focus? How do you construct yourself? And against these guys, because at one point he started to say thank you and good night, and then because they come and they give him a cigarette, and then they drink vodka together,
or let him watch football.
At one point. So he hasn't been abused physically, so that's good for him. But it's just a time that goes crazy, and him trying to see everywhere what he can take advantage to escape, if there is any chance to escape. So that goes in his mind all the time. And at one point he sees, why do I say thank you to these guys? Because I'm attached here all day long, and this has been weeks. So he was kind of going into a Stockholm syndrome maybe, and I wanted to show that, because after that he said, well, now enough of Mr. Nice Guy. And the day after he felt much better, much stronger, and he was ready to escape again. So there's these steps where he felt stronger. He was very afraid to collapse mentally, because he knew that if he collapsed, he was just going to go in like depress and probably miss maybe something that can happen, and he could take advantage to escape.
Right.
So he was trying to always stay alert.
Yeah, it's interesting too that notion, not just in terms of partly the alertness, the memory stuff, right? The when he starts doing the alphabet of the generals in war, because he's a military buff. The way that he kind of keeps himself present in the world is either through memory or even the constrained circumstances of his daily life, when they handcuff him so he can eat or go to the bathroom or whatever, and he gets a few minutes to kind of walk around and figure out where he is. Is it, it's a long book. I don't mean in a bad way. It needs to be long to tell the whole story, but it is also that kind of very constrained physical environment. What were the challenges in terms of, Jerusalem is also a long book, but Jerusalem, you have the whole city as a kind of a landscape in which to have the narrative take place. It goes
in all directions. This one is just one. That's
right. So what are the challenges of producing a kind of extended narrative? It has to be extended to tell the whole story, but it is, especially visually, it has to be in this very constrained space.
It was to find the balance, that the rhythm is, even if it's slow, that there's still like it's a kind of a minimalistic suspense, because I want the reader to turn the page, but then there's all these information that goes on, and then somehow that was the challenge, to find a good balance between not be boring and show everything that I wanted to show in a way that the people are going to turn the page.
And also the question I have is in terms of, because the other books have focused really on you as the main character, or on your stand-in, right? Your the fictionalized version of you in a certain way, the created version. Was there a different sense of responsibility in the sense, because he had, in some ways, had entrusted you with his story. Is there a different? I mean, how does that affect the way that you create what comes out on the page?
Well, that's probably why it took me so long to do it, because I was always postponing it, because it's much easier to do like the bad parenting guide or something that I do talk, because I can put myself into not so fantastic situation, but I don't care. But I had to put words in Christophe's mouth, so the only way to do that, I've included him in the process right from the beginning. So I said, well, Christophe, I'm going to write pages and send them to you, and then you give me feedback. Otherwise, I just don't know. I don't know what to write exactly. So I started, and then we went back like that. And he just changed a few things, basically, not much. And he trusted me, and we did know each other quite well after 15 years, because we have lots of points in common. We have kids of the same age, so we would see each other every second year or something. So he just let me go, and we changed a few things here and there. And after that, it was much easier than I thought, actually.
And he was he was with Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah,
and
he still is.
And your wife had worked with Doctors Without Borders also.
Yeah, that's how we met.
That's how you met.
Yeah.
I wonder because of the both of them having a relationship with that organization, and because of what happened, does that charge it for you in a certain sense? Were you ever worried that the same kinds of things might happen to you or your family while you were in other places?
Well, after that was the first kidnapping they had in the Doctors Without Border, and they've learned a lot from that first experience. They had a few one after, so now they take care a lot of they don't want to have kidnapping like that. So whenever there's there's a red line, and they train the people. Mm-hmm. If there's a kidnapping, don't do this. So there's the first thing they said, wait for us. We're looking for you, and don't try to escape.
Right.
But at the time, Christophe Andre was different, 1997, and but I've never been in a situation where I felt any danger or any kidnapping, because they put family in capitals where it's actually quite safe. Right. The staff, they go on the field much further. They can be in a situation where it's a bit dangerous, but usually, they're very careful not to have that type of. Well, the problem they have these years is that they start to they start to bomb hospitals. I mean, that's a crazy thing we have now. The war, it goes in all sorts of direction, and now they stop over nothing. That's so much against the Geneva Convention. Now they bomb the hospital. Everything, you can do everything these days. You have the feeling.
Yeah. I'm curious about in terms of that tension, as you were just saying. What do you do? They say don't try to escape. Stay there, and that is one of the questions that he asks in the narrative. If I had, he has to he thinks about, if I have the chance to, should I sit tight? Are there people working to get me, or should I try and take if the opportunity arises, should I take my fate into my own hands? Yeah. And it is actually, an unexpectedly difficult dilemma for, it makes sense, but I'm curious about your sense of that unknowing, right? Not knowing what to do in a given situation.
It's funny because Christophe, for him, his job or his duty, being an hostage, was to escape. Mm-hmm. So he said, if I go, I had to do the best to escape, and if it doesn't work, well, at least I will know that I've tried everything possible. And, well, too bad they've lost a lot of money, which depressed him so much that that was the worst time of his life. And, he felt that he had to do that because otherwise he would feel so terrible towards the people that he worked with. Mm-hmm. And he was an administrator somehow, so he was always trying to have the maximum with the money and then not spend as much, and then all of a sudden they say they're going to spend $1 million to get you back, and he just go, wow, no, that's not possible, that's too much. I don't know how much he was thinking he was worthing, maybe half of that.
No, that's one of the remarkable scenes right early in the book when he gets on the phone. They put him on the hostage takers put him on the phone with his associates, and they say they're asking for $1 million, and he says, don't pay it, that's way too much. I would be like, pay it, give them $5 million, just get me out of here.
Yeah, that's what most people would do, but that's where for me that's the real moment of heroism, because after 2 months of being attached to a radiator in a room where you don't know where you're going to be, he's able to say to these guys, don't pay them, I can hang on longer, but don't pay.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, you have the nerve to say that.
Would you do another book that revolves around an external figure, if the right story came around? I mean, in terms of it opening up your perspective on your own work, what was that like?
Well, now I have a lot of people who write me emails about their very interesting life, and they want me to illustrate that.
I'm sure there are plenty of stories in here.
Yeah, well, I can tell you two. Just two quick. One was in a sect, 15 years in a sect, but it was very too strange, too weird, and that's not too much my thing. And another guy was he was fetishist of being attached and to have like a mistress. And so he has that double life that he wanted me to show. And so he said, I really like your book, because of course it's 300 pages of a guy who's attached. And I was thinking it's probably the only guy who, when Christophe finally escaped, he could just go like, oh no, that's too bad. So, but no, this story of Christophe, it's a meeting, it's someone we met, and then after 15 years we became friends. No, I don't see that happening again, even though it has to be. I was very fascinated by people that were kidnapped. When they come back, how it works, and I don't know, I always felt it's something I cannot relate to someone who is in a sect at all, or someone who has fetishism of being attached. Well, maybe just a little bit. And but someone who's kidnapped for some reason, I just, my heart goes with him completely, because you just happen to be there at the wrong moment, at the wrong time. And this can happen if you go to Mexico, to go to Colombia, to go to Philippines, in lots of places. And it's just fascinating, because he loses his freedom completely. What do you do in a situation you have no control over your life? Even when you want to go to the toilet, it's not you who decides. So that's how you go crazy. And that's why when he had the chance to talk, that he wanted to make a statement like, don't pay them. That was the first time that he could just change something, or try to change something, where he could like, oh, now it's my turn to talk. Well, don't pay them.
Right. He asserts himself in that same way that he also decides, as you say, he's not going to thank them or be friendly, right? That the one piece of power he has, right?
After that, he felt like super strong. He said, well, now I really have to. And he was just looking around like crazy. Doesn't change things a lot, but he had like two chances, basically.
I'm curious, I want to talk about some of the other books too, which seemed to me, the first book of yours I read was Jerusalem, and that, and as well as the other books, seem to me to be incidental in the best sense, right? They grow out of just the experience of daily life, of the daily life of living in a place. And I'm curious about how that evolved for you as a style of narrative.
Well, I always work the same way. I take notes wherever I go. That's what I've done when I was in China for the first time, and I came back from China. I said, well, maybe these stories, if I put myself in there, that'd be fun. And it was just a short story. Then we did a second one, and then we decided to do a book with that. So that's 20 years ago. And then I was sent to Vietnam. I took notes. I came back, and I had not much to say. That it was just fun, and I had a great time. So basically just touristic stuff, and for me that's not enough. So I was sent away to Pyongyang, same for the work. They were outsourcing animation. And so I spent the first half hour. They give me flour, so I knew what these flour were for. And they said, we're not going to go to a hotel first. We're first going to go to, like, there's a nice hill where you can see the city. It's very nice. So I know where we were going because I was briefed by my company. So we go in front of the statue of Kim Jong-il, and then the flower, you put them in front of the statue, and you pay your respect to the dear leader. And as I was going like that, I was thinking, the stuff you have to do to earn your living. And at the same time, I was thinking, well, this is only half an hour, and I think there's going to be enough material to do a book.
Right.
So that was, I spent 2 months there, but there was enough stuff to talk about. And I worked the same way to going to Jerusalem or Burma, working on I take notes, and then I start to work on that when I come back home, because I've tried when I was in Burma to work while I was there, but I was too much close to the subject. Everything seems to be interesting because you're in an exotic place, and it doesn't work. And then when I came back, I actually removed a lot of pages that I've done while I was there. So now I don't do that. Well, I don't have much choice because now I have 2 kids. So whenever I go somewhere, my wife works, and I just go around with the kids and do whatever I have to do as a father. So that's what happened in Jerusalem and mostly in Burma as well. And I come back, and everything that I find funny, strange, a bit weird, or just interesting because I've learned, especially in Jerusalem, I put that in a book. So that's why, for me, it's like a postcard where I put everything that I think it's interesting.
I love the use of the kids because it on the one hand, it makes it so sort of mundane in a way. You're with the kids, you're trying to figure out what to do with them. On the other hand, it allows you access. It sort of allows you to move around the city. You know, and so the balance
That's
between
right.
the sort of personal story and the larger story is really effective.
Yeah, and we travel with kids. Anyone who has traveled with kids, you get to meet people that are more. Well, you're a family. It's very safe. People can talk to you and see you, especially when you have a little foreign kids. They all go crazy. I mean, Burma. My son was very popular, much more than me. So that was fun to see. And yeah, we have very good memories from that place. And yeah, it's a different way to travel with children, of course.
So if you know, like for instance, so as you're saying in Pyongyang, you knew within the first half hour, let's say, that there was enough material for a book. Does that change? I mean, if you know that you're, let's say, if you know you're going to write a book rather than thinking that you might write a book, does that change the experience of being there?
Yeah, I don't think I could do that. I could go and say, well, okay, like I'm going to go there. And because it happened to me once. I was in 2 months in Vietnam. I came back and, you know, everything was fun and great. It's like a funny picnic. Well, for me, it doesn't make a book. I need more than that. If I would have stayed a year, I think, in Vietnam, I would probably go deeper in the country and then get to meet people like I did in Burma, where I got to meet these people that were doing animation and illustration. I was hanging with them. That was great. So I thought, well, that's interesting. And sometimes I come back, just like in Jerusalem. I came back from Jerusalem. I was thinking, I don't think I can make a book with that because it just seems to be too complicated to explain. Because I spent a year with journalists and people that works in NGO and the UN and the ICRC, and they have lots of knowledge about the place because they've been there for 7, 10, and sometimes more than that years. And every question I had, they could answer with lots of detail. So, you know, my head was so full of information that I thought were all great, but I said I cannot put all that in a book. That would looks like a big thesis. That's not possible. So I waited a few months, and then I start with the first page where I have to buy diapers for my daughter, and we passed through a big mall, and then I said to the people, "Can we go there?" And then they say, "What's a colony?" And then and we're not supposed to encourage the colony, but it's Sunday, everything else is closed. So what do I do? So I thought, wow, that's a good way to start. Everything, even just buying diapers, becomes politics when you're in Jerusalem.
Right. And then you also have all the history. I mean, one of the most, for me, one of my favorite passages in the book is the one where you're saying, right, Jesus could have walked here, right? This street is, so you're really thinking about both history and and mythology and all of these things overlapping in a landscape like that.
I would have liked to talk more about the historical. I could have made just one book on Jesus because there's everything that is on the Bible. There's a trace on the city, which is just impossible, and we know it's fake, but people even go there to pray, even though it's not there probably. So yeah. There's lots of things to say, but I had to talk about the politic aspect as well. Otherwise, you cannot not mention the conflict there because it's so present. Right, of course.
And as far as I'm curious about the question of portraying yourself. Right, you portray yourself. It's a heightened. I'm assuming it's a heightened version of you in some way. You're playing up certain things for narrative effect or for dramatic effect.
I would say more resume, more like just a few facets of my personality, because I am kind of naive, and I didn't know nothing about the conflict going there. Can you believe that? That didn't really interest me, that part of the world. I was much more into Asia and all these countries over there. And then, we happened to be in the Middle East, so, okay, let's see what's going there. And I didn't read anything about the conflict. So, yeah, that's one aspect of me. And then you cannot explain the whole aspects of you because they're not all interesting. And the ones that are very efficient for what I do, like the humor, the stuff that I explain, I use these ones. So that's a a limited part of me, but it's still me. It's the same for the secondary character. That's even more simple. I show my wife, which she's always like that, because when she's working, she's like that. But other than that, she laughs all the time. But I don't show that because I don't have time to show all the aspects of the personality.
Well, and creating narrative is always about selectivity, right? You have to pick the detail. As you're talking about those very small details, you have to pick the small details that support the story that you're telling.
Yeah. So I'm always lost in cities. I don't understand stuff. It takes me time. So that works well with what I have to explain and show and make funny things. So that's why these aspects of my personality are very present in these books. Yeah.
I also want to ask you a little bit about the question of work and how work comes into the books. I mean, in Pyongyang or in Shenzhen, you're there for work. You're there for working. In Jerusalem, you go, or your character goes and speaks to Palestinian kids about drawing cartoons. I'm curious about how that. It's not meta, but that question of how does that, it allows you to talk about the form in some way. It allows you to talk about drawing and making comics in a way within the comic that you're making. And I'm curious about that as a part of the books.
Well, on the process, the way it works while I'm there, you have 1 year to understand what's going on. So you go, and then I get to meet people from the NGO, like these wives that were from Tel Aviv, and they were monitoring. I saw them in the neighborhood where we were, and they said, come someday. And when you arrive in a new place, you are very eager to get contacts and to know people and to have kind of a base somehow. So whenever I had a chance, I was saying and then I would go in places that normally I wouldn't go. I don't think so, because when you have your own life, you have all sorts of stuff to do. But there's a bit what happened. That's why it's 1 year was being very concentrated, because I knew that I wouldn't stay there, I wouldn't come back, and then I go see the people. I go with the tour, or the Hebron tour with the settlers, and then I do the Hebron tour with these Breaking the Silence guy, and that was super interesting to see. And so it's been a concentrated year where I try to put everything. So if I ever do a book, I'm going to have stuff to do. I'm always thinking, I need to, and the more it goes, the more I need some, because in China I was just traveling. It's more or less touristic stuff. But now I need to be in a situation where, this is so new and interesting. I'm sure nobody has seen that before. That I need to, that sparkle something that say, I'm going to do a book with that, because this is very interesting. Because I'm always afraid to bore people. So I think that's why I like doing comics, because it's very concentrate. You have 5 sentences in one page, 7 maximum, and a few drawings. So if you can just put everything in one page, then you go to the other. So that's why I like about comics, because it's very efficient. If you need a drawing that saves you a lot of text, then you use it, and then the opposite works as well.
Do you make the pages at scale, or do you? I mean, the books are the size they are. In when Spiegelman was doing Mouse, he actually drew the pages, or he said he drew the pages at the size that they were published. Do you do that, or do you?
No, I work a bit bigger, especially when you have to do background. Yeah, some work one-on-one, which is it's very hard to do, because especially for the text, because I write it by hand. It's nicer when it's shrink down a little bit. I work in the morning. I don't prepare the whole plan of the book. I just read my notes and say, this was interesting, and then I start my day doing the drawing in the morning and the sketch, mostly roughly, and then I draw in the afternoon. I do 1 page a day. So when you do a book of 300 pages, it takes 1.5 years, 2 years, and you need to have that pace. Otherwise, it would be too long. Same with the hostage. I was doing 1 page a day, and I was actually almost doing the same day that Christophe Andre was kidnapped, because I was at some point at the same time and had these handcuffs that I bought as a reference on my table. So I was doing the work every day. There's these handcuffs. I felt I was almost handcuffed myself to finish that book, because after 300 pages, I was like a marathon. I was kind of going that's too much.
And one last sort of nerdy question, and then I want to open it up to questions from you guys. But so if you're not writing necessarily with a plan,
no,
right?
That
so I mean, I understand how this works for prose. This is how I write prose also, but it feels to me, because that's my natural medium. I understand how I throw things out. How do you edit? How do you revise a piece of graphic literature?
I have good friends that reads them around. Yeah, especially after page 300, I had a doubt, like, wow, this is just going to be a boring book. And I said, is that suspense working or not? So I've passed it around. Because after 300 pages, it was too big that I couldn't see the whole picture, and so I passed it around and said, we want the rest. What's coming after? I said, okay, it's good. And then I start. Sometimes they said, well, here it's kind of confusing. I don't understand this and this. And since I know them well, I know if I change it or not, because sometimes they have their own little things, and it's better to work like that. And sometimes if it's a place where I was not so sure, and they say, well, this is kind of confusing, then I change, of course.
Will you change a panel? Will you redo the entire page? How does the revision process work?
Well, it can be both, because sometimes just on the text you can balance with the text, but sometimes the drawing is confusing. Mm-hmm. At one point, Christophe Andre was like that, and he was on the side. You see it from the front, and he said it looks like he's sucking his thumb.
Right.
And I thought, oh yeah, that can be confusing, and I changed it, of course. And I've seen it like 10 times before, and I didn't see it. So yeah, you need to have different beta tester to work on your stuff. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for talking with me about this. Let's give you a hand. And then just raise your hand and we will call on you. Yes?
Talk a bit about the use of color and light in Hostage.
Yeah, the whole process was I've used a drawing that is more realistic than what I do in the other books, because they're funny. This one has no humor in it. I didn't want to have something that looks cartoony. So I've used that sketchy line on flying paper that I would scan. So there's no like real page. It's just I have a box full of drawings that I've done for the book. At the end of the day, I would scan all the drawings that makes the page, put them together. So I have that kind of sketchy, kind of sketchy drawing, kind of fragile, like Christophe Andre was. So that was the idea. Keep it very simple, simple story. It's just the stretching of time that is very important. And simple story, simple line, simple drawing, and simple color. Because I thought of doing it in black and white. Then I tried just one color for the shadows, and it worked fine. I said, just one color is going to be enough. So it's a bichromie. It's just a 2-color book.
And I love the way the light migrates across the wall. The sunlight comes.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people mention that. It's a page I was thinking of removing, actually. Somehow, yeah.
When you go back and write your memories, do you find yourself remembering differently?
Yeah, it's a mix of both, because from these notes, I have to do it like a few months after, 6 months, but I still remember the whole year that's behind me, but not completely, so I have a very bad memory. That's why I took notes from when I was in China, because I forgot the first trip I did. It was 4 years before. So I took notes, and then I used that to do my comics. And when I read my notes, I remember, of course, like, oh yeah, this was interesting. Sometimes it's just one note, and this brings me back the memories, and I say, yeah, this is interesting. Well, we're going to talk about that in the book, and then I put it. So it's a mix of both.
If anyone, I was thinking about a lot of graphic novels have been adapted as films, and I'm wondering if you've ever thought about that for your works, or if anyone has approached you.
Yeah, people have approached me, but it didn't work so far. But me doing an adaptation of my own stuff, no. Because I've worked in animation, that's my first job, and I know what kind of work it is. And for me, doing comics is a lot of freedom, because I don't have to convince anyone that it's a good idea to do a book like that. I just work on the book, I show it to the publisher, so it's very efficient. Working on an animation film, you have to convince people that this is going to be a good film. So you spend a lot of energy on not actually the art stuff. And if I want to do a science fiction book tomorrow, I go on my table and I just start to do it. I show it to my publisher, and if he likes it, that's going to be a book. Film, it's going to take months and months just to try to convince people to do that. So and if I do an adaptation of my book, it's going back to, I've done just a short film this year of the parenting thing, so it's just a 3-minute film. But I had to go back and redraw a story that I've done like 4 years ago, wow, that's very boring to do. I prefer to. Of course, there's the magic of text, and, of voice and sound, but I prefer to do 2 books and 3 books than just one movie, because that's the amount of time you need to do a movie.
Other questions? Yes.
Do you have fiction stories that you want to tell?
If I have what?
Do you have fiction stories that you want to tell?
Oh, fictions. Not right now. Actually, right now I would like to work on a biography material. So work on someone that has existed and talked about him. So I have like a few ideas, and I'd like to work on that. Have someone else from, and so yeah. Sometimes I have fictions, but I haven't. It's not for now. Maybe later. Yeah.
You feel like you have to, like when you do your personal stories, that you have to be in an interesting city or place to tell those stories?
Yeah, I prefer that, because I work with culture gap and exotisms, and when I'm in countries like here, I notice stuff that, this is different, they don't do it like that here. So I like that situation where for observation it's perfect. I live in France for the past 25 years, and I could have done a book when I arrived in France, but not anymore, because I'm part of the country. I've embraced that culture, and I'm part of it, so I don't see it differently now. So, that's how it works.
So when you have done books about being in different places, for reference, do you take a lot of photographs, or do you go to the internet, or how do you?
Yeah, I do all that, but it has evolved. For China, I had no camera. I'm really bad at taking pictures, and I don't like it, actually. So, but it was just kind of buildings with no reference. Same with Pyongyang. I had no pictures because I was thinking because I was with a guide and a translator all the time. They're going to feel more comfortable with me if I don't take pictures around. So it worked a little bit. So I had no pictures except from a friend who has taken video stuff. I was using a bit of that. But I need much more reference for the other ones because especially Jerusalem, I took pictures. I did a lot of sketch that I've actually used because the sketch I don't have so much and I know exactly what they are. Pictures I have like hundreds with the kids, and it would take me hours to go back and find the good one. So instead of that, I would go on Google and find it was not there when I was working on my book. It is now. You can go on Google Street View now in Jerusalem, and but even just a Google image, you get or all these Flickr stuff. I have found the car that I've sold on Google Image. Yeah, so you find everything.
I heard you when you were talking about the composition of this book, and you wanted to refrain from references to what's happening in France, and the book is very self-contained in the room, quite literally. And intellectually, I thought that was a really great choice. Do you prefer being that kind of grounded in the realism form, or do you see yourself experimenting with this sometime later on a future project potentially?
Depends on the story, but I remember I always go back to when I was listening to Christophe telling that story from beginning to end. I was going, wow, this is so good. And it was good because I was with him and then I was in the room. And if you write, meanwhile in France, and then you go in France, you kind of break. I wanted the reader to turn the page and kind of suffocate because they said, I'd like to escape, but not so easy. With 300 pages, you really have to turn. So I wanted to have that physical feeling, because when you read a book, it's different. If you have a movie, it's 2 hours. It's going to be 2 hours for everyone. But a book, you can be a slow reader, a fast reader. So you can take a long book. It's no problem. You just put it there and then continue. So I didn't mind that. That would be a long book. So it would be different with some other kind of stories. And I didn't want to do as well with the time to say 2 weeks later. And then you see him, his beard's a bit longer, he's tired and he's more dirty. And you say, 2 weeks has passed. No, that was not good enough. I wanted to show like days almost every day. And then you really feel the 2 weeks going by and you go, wow, this is only 2 weeks. I can't believe it. And then you go like that. So, yeah. That's how I saw the book from the beginning. So after that, you just have to do it. Yeah.
Do you know if he's seen the book?
Yeah, of course. We've worked together, so he has read the book as he go. And I was afraid. I didn't want to have a bad surprise with him when he received the book on the post. So he opened the books and he reads it. And for his family, it's really good because they've been in that story with a tremendous stress, of course. And he has told them that story many, many times. But now that they see image and they can see him, they can feel what he has been through. For them, it was very good. So they're able to really turn the page to that. So now that story is in the past. There's a book that explained the whole thing. It's really gone. So yeah, they thanked me warmly when I came to their place and we had a dinner together. So it was very nice to see that. And I remember just one thing that when the book was finished, in the book he thinks about his family. He said everybody's going to be worried and they're going to talk to my sister. And then he reads, it says, well, I have 2 sisters. So I just rewrite the whole thing. My 2 sisters. So we read the prints, you read the PDF, it's all good. We print the whole book. And then he writes to me, he said, I have a brother too. The whole thing was printed. I couldn't believe it. He said, how many do you have like that? And then his brother was mad, so I had to phone him and say that's my fault and everything. And then, but we reprinted, so we changed that because it's easy to change. And then I sent him a book and I signed it all.
Earlier in your dialogue, you talked about your words being taken into this framework of ethnology or ethnography, your designs. And when we think about ethnography or ethnology, we think more about written description, thick description as text. But here you're using the visual. And I was wondering if you can talk about translating text into visuals and how you frame text into designs, and what would be some challenges, but also what would be some advantages of actually rendering visible what text cannot convey here.
Well, that's what you do in comics, because sometimes if I go always for the most efficient thing. If I can explain in a drawing, I go with the drawing. Or if you have some mood, then it's nice because you have a drawing or something that's very beautiful. You can draw it. If you explain, it doesn't work. There's an example I use once in a while. It's when I was in Jerusalem. Then so the first page you have to explain the situation. We arrive. We're in the airport. So now I have 2 kids. There's Louis. There's Alice. They're this year old, and I wrote the whole thing, and I thought, well, this is so boring. So I found a way. I just have one drawing. Well, with an arrow, I just write Louis 10, Alice 6 years old, and that's all. Because you understand what's going on. And okay, boom, I'm in the house, and I say, well, now we're in Jerusalem, and blah blah. So I like it because it's always something you can do very efficient stuff with comics, and I really like that.
Do you feel like movies are an influence on your ability to be a visual storyteller?
More novels that I read. Actually, I read novels, and the way they treat real life and their own life. It's very. I've just been reading a lot of books now that I'm traveling here, and so they mix the reality with their own life, and I think that's really interesting to do. So yeah, I'm more influenced by novels than movies, because we always link comic books with movies, but they're so different. It doesn't really work the same way.
Really? In what way do you think they're different?
Well, if sound, I mean, if you have anything, or I remember there was music in the comics that works because you describe, but in a movie it would work really well. And the rhythm in a comic is so different because you have the composition, the drawing, and then you have to turn the page. In a movie, you just sit there, and if you're tired, you cannot just put the movie and start the rest the next day. It's a very different approach as a reader, as the people who read or see the movie.
So when you were 10 years old, did you think that you were going to be who you are today?
No, not like that. I was reading Lucky Luke and Tintin and Asterix, and I thought I was drawing a lot, like lots of kids, and I was thinking, I'd like to do comics. I was doing comics on my own, and then I learned animation, and I was thinking that I stopped reading comics at one point, and I was just focusing on doing animation, and I thought I would do animation for the rest of my life. Then I arrived in France, and I saw the independent movement, and I thought, wow, that's interesting, because this is people of my age doing comics for the people of my age. Because at one point it was just for children or teenager, but this was different. They could talk about all sorts of more adult stuff. And I started to sending a few short stories, and it worked, and then it became a book. But it just went very gradually. I didn't like put books, and then all of a sudden, I just do a short story that became Shenzhen, and that was at the time, that's 25 years ago, it was just like 2,000 copies, and they were very happy. So you couldn't make a living with that. It's not possible.
I just want go ahead, and then we'll go to you.
I'm curious about, since your graphic novels are published in English and French, and you're from Canada originally, how do you engage with the process of writing? Which do you do first? And I assume you write both. It's not translated.
No, I don't do the English version. No, there's a translator, and but we do have discussion though, because we talk. I say, can we say this and this, especially for humor, because sometimes it's nice to finish with one word specifically, and then so I've noticed that. So we have a few discussion on that. Yeah, since my English is good enough, I can read it, but not for the. And sometimes she said, no, this sounds a bit strange. Okay, well. You go ahead. And I like that. But in the other language, I cannot do that. Because so far, Pyongyang has been translated in 20 languages. Yeah, Turkish is the last one now.
You're saying that novels are more of an influence than films. Are there any novels, either prose novels or graphic novels, that you recommend?
Well, there's one who has translated in English. I was reading Emmanuel Carrère, French guy. He did a book called Limonov. So the story of a Russian guy, and you go through the whole history of Russia, the recent one, and he's in there, like the writer. He appears once in a while, and he talks. He said, "Oh, I was there at that time." So he kind of comes in the story as well. It's fascinating. It's very interesting.
What's it like to work on something for hours and hours and then completely forget about it?
You mean to have to be? It's a solitary kind of work. Yeah, that's why I had 2 studios working on that project, and one I have a little room on my own, and I was saying, well, I have to focus and work on that, which is true. But at the beginning, then I realized I was like all day long on my own in a room drawing about a guy all alone in a room, and I thought, well, I just can't take it, and I just went to the art studio where I share with other friends, and that's much better because at dinner time we could go together.
Do you have any current comic artists or storytellers that you follow? And do you follow any admire comics?
I do follow a lot of people. Yeah, I read so many comics. There's one that I like this year by Lewis Trondheim, who's called Coquelicot d'Irak. So it's actually, his wife is from Iraq. She's from Mosul. And so he described her youth when she was in Mosul, playing around in these places that don't exist anymore. They're being bombed away. And it's very nice. It's very charming. And it's coming at Drawn and Quarterly as well. They're publishing it, I think, or it's published yet. Yeah, I really liked that.
Any other? We have time for about one or two more if anyone has any other questions. All right. Well, thanks. Let's give a big hand to Guy Delisle.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.